ladies, welcome back to the Joy Talk. You already know this is your host, Vanessa Joy, and I am so happy to be here for episode 5. Yes, ladies, I hope you've been enjoying our weekly episodes and catching some gems. Please let me know in the comments. Let me know what's going on. Let me know what's coming up for you while we go through all of these little gems and practices through our lives. Okay. Today, I have the topic for us women. I have the topic that I know is going to ring a bell, ring a little something, something inside of you. That's for sure. And we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome. Okay. Imposter syndrome. Oh, I was first and foremost, it's International Women's Day right around the corner. For me, it's like it's International Women's Month, but for me, it's International Women's Life. Like every day of our lives, we have to remember all the work we've done to be where we are, and we have to continue to progress, and we have to continue to uplift each other as women, and we have to just create spaces, places, moments, opportunities that we can shine in. And that brought me to imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is such a common syndrome within us women, and it comes at different times of our lives, right? It'll also come in different moments of our lives. It'll come in different areas, but most of all, it'll mostly come in our professional career. And that's really what I want to kind of hone in on, is imposter syndrome in our professional career. Like, what is going on in our heads when we're going through imposter syndrome? What's happening? What's going on? And there's just such a big opportunity for us to unlock imposter syndrome and just make sure that we control the thoughts, when we control the syndrome, when it's syndroming with us. Okay, so imposter syndrome. And how I actually came with the topic of imposter syndrome today is by actually feeling some real true imposter syndrome. Listen, I really went through it and I was like, okay, this is it. And it just came very recently. So I was like, I got to do an episode about this, because I know how common imposter syndrome is for my women. So basically, I was kind of just like, how can I say? I was just kind of like fine-tuning all this stuff on the Joy Talk, and I was fine-tuning my description. I was fine-tuning my bio. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm a self-development strategist. I want to be a self-development expert. Like I'm a business and marketing consultant, and I'm a brand consultant, but I'm also a self-development expert. Well, I wouldn't say expert, but I would say self-development, like strategist. Like that's who I am. And I wanted to kind of bring that in. And I was like, I felt a way when I said that to myself. I was like, oh, is that like, am I allowed to call myself that? Am I allowed? And like, there was like two part in my imposter syndrome episode. It was like the first part of like, am I allowed? Do I belong in the space of calling myself this? And then the other phase was like, oh, it actually feels really good to say that. It actually comes together in a way that's absolutely perfect for where I want to go and what I am doing. It actually feels right. And this is when I knew it was imposter syndrome, because there was the part where the little fear was overlapping my reasoning of, yeah, I actually belong, and yes, I should call myself that. And then there was the part of like, ooh, yeah, let's do it. So then I call my girl. I'm like, I think I'm going through imposter syndrome right away. She's like, girl, I know what you're talking about. I know when you step into different areas of your career, of your professional life, and you kind of own that new part of yourself, and knowing that you deserve it and you actually value your capabilities and competencies, you're going to go through that stretch. And this is what I want to talk to you guys about today, because the stretch is stretchy. It's scary, but it is 100% like a 100% needed for us to actually step into that version of us, step into the version of us of like, yeah, this is who I am in my professional career. Yeah, I am a professional. I am an expert. I am a consultant. I am a VP. I am a director. I know my stuff. And stepping into that posture is allowing us to grow with our careers and is allowing us to bring our careers to so many more levels. But we have to allow ourselves to do that. And we have to push ourselves in a way to get there. And this is what I want to really deep dive with you guys, because I know this is a reality that we all go through. And I know that this is something that will come and come and come again as we evolve, because we will be evolving and growing in our professional careers. So it's really important to kind of understand first what imposter syndrome is. Second, what can I kind of do, or what is the type of talk I need to have with myself to allow myself to remove the imposter syndrome and allow myself to grow. And three is like, put that in practice. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Okay, I'm excited. Can you tell? I know you can. First and foremost, what is imposter syndrome? So I went in my little research and I wanted to find like the definition that really kind of tied it all in. So the definition from the Oxford Dictionary is imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or legitimate. It's the persistent inability to believe that our success, that our things that we are accomplished are deserving to us. How disempowering is that? How disempowering is that definition of imposter syndrome? Let me just repeat it because I want this to kind of sink in. Imposter syndrome is the persistent inability of recognizing one's worth and one's belief. No, sorry, let me rewind that back. Imposter syndrome, I was like going in so many directions in my mind. Imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved, that one's own success is deserved, thinking that we do not deserve this, thinking we do not deserve a seat at the table, thinking we do not deserve our place in this meeting, thinking we do not deserve to call ourselves a professional in this field, call ourselves an expert in this field, to call ourselves a consultant in that field, to call ourselves a director or VP or the best person who worked on this project, to call ourselves the things that we need to be calling ourselves. It's that inability to allow ourselves to believe that we deserve that. And how, once again, how disempowering is that? But rest assured, it is one, very normal, and two, it's part of our growth. And that's where the practice of identifying like, okay, I'm going through imposter syndrome right now is going to allow you to kind of break that imposter syndrome and start believing in yourself and knowing that you deserve that place. You've worked hard to get to this place. You've gotten the skill sets, you've gotten the gems, you've gotten the trophies, you've gotten the places, you've gotten the experience to get there. So that was my definition, well, the Oxford Dictionary's definition of imposter syndrome and how I kind of view it. And what does that look like in practice? Okay, you're like, I understand what imposter syndrome is, Vanessa. I get it. I feel it. I know it. Every time I go in a different level of my career, I get the imposter syndrome feelings. But how does that show up for me? Okay, so that's kind of an important thing because you want to understand how imposter syndrome shows up in your work. You want to understand how imposter syndrome shows up in your professional career, in your behavior. And once you kind of understand what's the behaviors that are attached to imposter syndrome, you can kind of tell yourself like, okay, yeah, that's definitely what I was going through. And that's definitely what I was kind of hiding sometimes behind that syndrome. So first, imposter syndrome can look like being over perfectionist, wanting every single thing to be perfect just to remind yourself that you've done the work, just to remind yourself that you can show that you've done something so perfect that nobody can tell you nothing. And just like hiding behind like criticism or the feedback just because you know you've been working for something to be extremely perfect. So that's how imposter syndrome can show up as well. You play the superhero. Playing the superhero, like we are the best, we're the saviors, we're the people who, we're the person who's gonna just come and save the day, save the project, save the department, save whatever. We kind of take on that role of superhero. And it also kind of shows up in sometimes in our lives as in a relationship, right? You're the superhero. I'm going to come here. I'm going to take care of everything. Don't worry about nothing. And you disempower the other people on your team. You disempower your partner. You disempower your kids sometimes because you're playing superhero. That's one way that imposter syndrome shows up. The one that we kind of know and the one that's a little bit more common is the fear of failure. Like, fear of failure will literally paralyze us. The fear of failure will just stop us from getting to where we want to go. Like, being so scared of failing without even trying is one of the ways that imposter syndrome shows up, because you're like, no, I don't deserve to call myself a podcast creator because I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm not going to start the podcast. Well, if you don't start the podcast, you'll never be a podcast creator. That's the facts. You know what I mean? If you don't work in a new field, you can never say that you've worked in that field. That's the fact. So the fear of failure is going to stop us from taking action. And that can look like procrastination. Procrastination is one way that imposter syndrome shows up as well. It's like, I'm going to start my business when I have my website, when I have the 10 clients, when I have a name for myself, when I have all these things, which are important factors to put in when you're starting a business. But are you working to start your website? Are you working to get your clients? Are you working to do that? Are you waiting for that to happen? Because one, it'll never happen if you don't start. And then two, you can't call yourself a business owner unless you do the things that you think are needed to become a business owner. So there's like two things that we're scared and not starting that is disempowering us from starting our business. So that's a very important one, because I really want us to remember, if we are scared to speak up in a meeting, if we are scared to say something that is nonsense, if we are scared to go and get what is ours and what we truly desire, we're not going to get to where we want to go. You know, like the fear of being humiliated, the fear of being wrong, the fear of starting, the fear of starting at zero is so disempowering to us that it doesn't allow us to show up. But the thing is, unless you start, unless you do the things, you're not going to be able to show up. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a vicious cycle in itself, because if you don't start, then you can't start. And if you can't start, then you can't do the thing that you really want to do. And if you don't really do the thing that you really want to do, then you're not working in true alignment with yourself. So, ladies, this is a big one. The next one is denial of competence. So it's kind of like what I was talking about. Fear is like you deny that you're capable. You deny that you're competent. You deny your capabilities. This is something so common I see in women, is like, and even in myself, is like you deny, or you kind of forget, you kind of downplay. Yes, that's the word, ladies. You downplay your ability to do the task. You downplay the ability to do that role. Like, if you've been a marketing specialist for 5 years, trust me, you can go after working as a manager. You can go after moving up. You have the capabilities. You have the competencies. You have the experience. It's behind you. It's in your pocket. But you have to go get what else is needed to move up. But in order to do that, you have to move up. You know what I mean? So you just have to never downplay your experience, never downplay your competencies. I know it's easier said than done. I know, ladies. I know you're telling me, Vanessa, it's so easy for you to say this. Like, you got your podcast, like, no, it's not easy for me to show up on my first episode and like record and do all these things. It's not easy for me. You know what? The type of things that came into my mind that was going to stop me if I let it. But then I was like, no, I got to remember my capabilities and my competencies and my purpose and what I really want to do. And if I don't do it, then I'm always going to be miserable. So very important to never downplay your experience, never downplay your competencies. And especially the fact that you are you and nobody else is you, and that's your superpower. So your experience is very much valuable. The last one is, once again, the difficulty of recognizing our own success. When we are going through imposter syndrome in our professional career, it's so easy to forget what we've done. So yes, we can downplay our capabilities and competencies, but we will also downplay our past wins. Ladies, if you've launched a big campaign that was extremely successful, or that wasn't successful, but that you've learned so much from it and you're able to bring that back for another campaign in the marketing world, for example, this is a big win. This is a big achievement. Everything that we do has a certain amount of learning to it. Yeah, I think that makes sense in my head. So it's really important to recognize the big wins we've had in the past. Like, you had big wins. We've had L's. Of course, we're going to catch some L's sometimes, but we have to celebrate our wins. And if we are letting our imposter syndrome take over us, it's like we're downplaying all of our accomplishments, and we do not want to do that. Okay, so that's what kind of, in a big way, imposter syndrome looks like and how it can show up in your everyday life. And now I got like 5 ways I want us to approach imposter syndrome whenever it comes up. Like, it's a ways to approach, but it's also some motivational. I just want to inject some really positive thoughts on how we can approach our professional careers and how we can move up in a way that is tailored to us. Because this is one big thing that's important. I know you heard this, but in the stats, they say that men will apply to a job when they have about like 30 to 40% of the competencies and the skill sets on the CV needed. Women will wait till they have like 80% and plus. It makes no sense. We got to really, really make sure that we got to show up in a way. But that's a discussion for another day. That I just wanted to kind of remind ourselves that men they'll have their imposter syndrome show up in different ways, but in their professional careers, they're going to go get the bread. They're going to go get their money. They're going to go get the power. They're going to go get the status. They're going to go get what they believe is theirs. Why wouldn't we do the same? And I'm not trying to say, like, I'm not trying to downplay men or whatever, like, because that's good for them, and we can get inspired by that. Like, we can just say, hey, my professional career, my career pays for my bills. It brings the bread on the table. It allows me to live my rich life, like Ramit Sethi would say. It allows me to do the things, and that is very important. I am the sole creator of the resources I create when it comes to my professional career. So why wouldn't I go get what's mine? Why wouldn't I go get what I truly want? So that is really important. Okay. First things first practice. Catch the feelings, catch the fear, control the inner voice, control the doubt. This is a big one. And I know you know this one, but it's very big. Because the thing about imposter syndrome, it's all in internal conflict. Imposter syndrome is an internal conflict. So when we go through doubts, when we go through the fear, when we go through those different things, it's an internal conflict. So it's really important to pinpoint, what am I saying to myself? What is the practice that I am telling myself? Am I telling myself I can't do that? Am I telling myself that will never be my position? I will never be able to achieve that. I'm way too scared. I'm not ready. What is the responsibility you have within your inner dialogue? What is the responsibility you are willing to recognize? And how are you going to change that? Know that this is really important, because imposter syndrome is an internal conflict. It's an internal dialogue. It's an internal thing that happens in our mind. And we are allowed, and we can, and we should change the data that is in our mind. Just like when I talked about self-love, it's like how you speak to yourself is gonna have an impact. So how you speak to yourself within your professional career is going to have a big impact when it comes to imposter syndrome. You can literally start believing you belong in that meeting room, and every day have an internal dialogue that is positive, that's enabling you to show up in that meeting and bring down all your ideas, or just show up in the meeting as you should with your true presence and essence. Listen, ladies, this is going to change the game. If we were all willing to show up and control that internal dialogue within ourselves, we would change the game. And I know we can. There's a lot of place and there's a lot of opportunities for us to do that. And this is why we're here today. Number 2, knowing that your thoughts are as relevant and your experience is just as important, and that your insight is just as valuable as anybody else in any room. And whether that room is on social media, whether that room is in an office, no matter the room, know that your thoughts are just as relevant, your experience is just as valuable, and that your insights are just as important as anybody else in the room. Recognize that it's okay to know that you don't know an answer or a topic, or you don't have the expertise that we're talking about in the meeting room. It's okay to know that. And it's okay to know when you know. It's okay to know that you have the expertise as well. And when you don't know something that's happening in the meeting room, or when you don't know something that happens in a dialogue. Listen, I talk to my business partner every single day. There are things she talks to me about in HR, or about things that are really more specific in her field. And I sit there knowing who I am, but I also know I don't know what she's talking about, but I'm still listening. And then when she finishes her conversation, I'll tell her, can you explain this concept to me? Can you explain this to me? I don't know what that is. And for her, that question might be so basic and so simple. She could look at me and be like, Vanessa, you don't know what that means? But she'll never do that because she respects the fact that I'm actually asking her the question. Of course, yes, she's my business partner, but trust me, I've been in corporate world too, and I've done the same thing. I was really scared to always ask a question since my childhood and my teenage years, because I was always scared that my question would feel or sound stupid, air quotes. But in my adult years, I really pushed myself to ask the questions when I didn't know, and it really, really got me so much further than I would ever think. So just remember, your thoughts are just as relevant. Your thoughts are just as relevant. Your experience is just as important, and your insights are just as valuable as anybody else in the room. And once you know that, you will be able to recognize your power. You'll be able to recognize that you are allowed to stand here and show up for yourself. And also, little disclaimer, other people in the room may be feeling like you too. So the fact that you're showing up, even if you kind of feel like an imposter, is going to really create an inspiration. It's going to create an energy and a vibe that is going to help people also show up. Number 3, tell yourself you belong. Tell yourself you belong. Tell yourself you belong in this industry. You belong on social media. You belong in the meeting room. You belong in your position in your professional career. Tell yourself you belong. This is an important one, okay? Telling ourselves we belong is allowing us to remind ourselves why we're doing the thing we're doing. It's reminding us why we are here. And it's extremely important for us to know that we belong. Okay? It's not like someone else's job to tell us that we belong. Because first of all, in the corporate life, in the world, not everybody got the time to tell you belong, okay? Because everybody's out here chasing their bread and chasing the things that they want to do for their own professional career. Yes, you'll have a friend once in a while that tells you, Vanessa, you belong. And I'll be like, yeah, thanks, girl. But at the end of the day, you are your own person, and you are the person who you speak with the most. So it's very important that you tell yourself you belong. And this is another important fact too. Do not waste your time in a meeting, in a place, in your career, asking yourself you belong. Because when you take that time to ask yourself you belong, you are wasting time in that seat. Okay? I want to repeat that because this is a powerful one. Tell yourself you belong. Tell yourself you belong, because we can't be out here sitting and asking ourselves, do we belong in the situations that we need to belong in? We can't be out here wasting time asking ourselves, do we belong? Because we are wasting opportunities. We are wasting energy. We are wasting our voice when we are just sitting in a place asking ourselves, we belong, instead of telling ourselves we belong and acting accordingly within that situation. You know what I mean? It's like if I'm sitting in a meeting room where there's only men and in a boardroom and we're presenting financial quarters, financial results, whatever, financial results. I wish we were financial results, whatever. Okay. I've been in those situations. Trust me. And you just sit in the meeting and you're like, do I belong here? I don't belong here. These men out here, they have PhDs. They have all this experience. They're just like you. And if you tell yourself if you use that time in that meeting to ask yourself if you belong, you are wasting your time, your potential, and your energy. Use that time in the places that you are to tell yourself that you belong first and act accordingly. If I'm in that meeting, I want to act like I belong, and I want to interact and participate in the world as I belong. And this is in a lot of areas of our life, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a professional. Don't waste your time asking yourself if you belong. Because if you waste your time asking yourself you belong, you are not acting accordingly to where you should. You are not acting accordingly in where you belong. You know what I mean? If I'm wasting my time asking myself, do I belong with these creators of podcasts? Do I belong as a consultant in brand and marketing? Well, I'm not bringing ideas to the table. I'm not bringing value. I'm not bringing insight, or I'm not even learning because I'm just so caught up in my head asking myself if I belong. So this is a really important one, ladies. Do not waste your time asking yourself if you belong. Take that time to belong. Take that time to bring value to a meeting. Take that time to bring value in that professional context that you are in. Okay? So this is one big important thing. Don't start like telling yourself, I belong in the meeting, and you're just going through this internal exercise right in the meeting. You have to do this before. This practice has to come before. I belong. I am here. My value is as important as anybody else. My experience is just as insightful. My competencies are just as good as anybody else. Okay? Now, the next thing, practice being in rooms that were not necessarily designed for you. Practice being in rooms where you can speak up. Practice being in rooms where you consciously feel like you belong. Practice being in rooms where you feel like you don't belong. Practice being in rooms where there is no seat for you. Okay, this is a big one too, because being in rooms where we know we belong is one easy way. Being in rooms where we feel we don't belong, where we feel it's sticky to speak up, where we feel like we shouldn't be here, these are the places that will stretch you out. These are the places where you will grow immensely. Practice being in rooms where you don't necessarily think you belong in. And the same goes for industries. When you're a business owner, when you are someone who is an entrepreneur, practice being in places you don't think you belong. Like, we're just a little consulting firm and we're going to go to this big event. Yes, girl, you're going to go to this big event and you're going to shake people's hand and you're going to say, I'm a consultant in this. I do this. I'm a lash tech. I have my beauty salon. Yes, because there's always going to be the big guys. There's always going to be the big corporation. There's always going to be someone who's way more advanced in their career, professionally or as a business owner. There's always going to be someone with a lot more knowledge. But you have your own knowledge too. You have your own competencies. You have your own experiences and you're doing your thing. And that's really important. So practice. Being in rooms that you feel like you don't belong. Practice being in industries that you feel like you don't belong. Practice being in events or places where you feel you don't belong. And that's really important, okay? The last one I will say, and this is a big one, okay? Because I kind of went hard on you guys, on ourselves too, on myself too. But this is a big one too. Be grateful for who you are. Be grateful for who you are. This is all about self-love, right? remember and value oneself. Remember who you are. Remember your competencies. Remember what you bring to the table. Remember what you've done. Celebrate yourself every single day. I wish we could, and I hope we will, tell ourselves, thank you for this. Thank you, Vanessa, for showing up this morning when it was a little bit harder. Thank you, Vanessa, for doing the thing that you thought was going to be hard and you did really well. Thank you for, not thank you. It could even be like, I'm proud of you for asking the questions. I'm grateful that you took the courage to do that. Practice that gratitude within yourself, being grateful within yourself, with yourself, I mean, with and within, why not? Be grateful with yourself on all the things that you're doing and all the things that you're accomplishing. And this is the thing, right, with imposter syndrome. You've watched this episode, you've listened to this episode, and you're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm gonna step out. I'm gonna talk in the board meeting. I'm gonna raise my hand. I'm gonna tell all my ideas. And you get to the board meeting, and obviously we're not gonna do that right away. We might, if you do, ladies, shout out. But if you don't, know that it's okay, because it's I was gonna say process and practice. It's a process. What do I want to say? It's a process. It takes time. So you just have to know that you're getting there. And the more you step out, the more you practice being in situations where you think you don't belong, where you practice that you can't speak up, but you are actually speaking up. The more you practice, the better it will be. And the most incredible gems will come out of that. And that zone where you feel uncomfortable, that zone where you feel an imposter is going to become less and less, and that zone of comfort is going to become more and more. Whew! Listen, this is a topic I love so much, and it's just so accurate for this day and time. We're doing so much, ladies. There's a lot of progress being done, but there is a self-responsibility when it comes to us building the careers we want, us being in places that we want to be in, us being in positions we want to be in. We have to really hone in and own what we want. If you want to be the next VP, I want you to say it. I want to be the next VP, and I'm going to bring something to the table that's going to be completely different. If you want to be a successful professional in whatever field you are, I want you to say it. Say it out loud. Say it to yourself. How can you not say it to your own self? And I'm saying this to myself when I'm saying this, right? It's like when I was like imposturing, I'm totally inventing words, by the way. Well, and verbs. When I was imposturing, like, oh, can I call myself that? Can I call myself this? And I was like, yes, because that's what I want to be. That's who I want to be. That's the woman I want to be. I have to call myself that because no one else is going to call me that for me. And even if someone else were to call me an expert or a strategist in X field, it wouldn't feel the same as when I decide to call myself that, when I decide to own that for myself. So it's really important to understand the responsibility at play. You have your own responsibility when it comes to fighting imposter syndrome, when it comes to disseminating that syndrome within ourselves. And that is really important. And another really important thing is, there's a lot of important things, clearly, well, to me. When we start disseminating imposter syndrome, we start understanding also that there are environments, there are spaces that are not created for us to belong. And that's a fact. There are environments, there are workspaces, there are industries that have not been created and in a way where they were thinking of women. They were not necessarily thinking of where women would belong in these spaces. But the good thing is that the fact that we are working towards that, well, the fact that we are working towards belonging, where we are creating spaces where we belong, we then create a space for the next person. We then create a space for the next woman of color. We are creating these spaces when we decide to show up and we belong. And that is really important. And that is when I talk about a ripple effect, when we work towards ourselves, when we work for ourselves, when we self-develop as women, it creates a ripple effect. And that is the perfect example. That is that, my ladies, for Imposter Syndrome episode 5. I hope you catch a gem. Let me know what comes up. This is a big topic. Let me know what comes up. Let me know what was a situation where you were or are feeling like an imposter. I want to know, and tell me what's a practice that you want to take away and you're going to put in practice right now. And just really remember who you are, ladies. Remember who you are. You have the ability to create the space, create the environment, create your own professional career and path that you truly want. But you gotta go get it for yourself. You gotta make sure that you carve that way for yourself. So that was that. Ladies, please, if you like this video, like, subscribe if it's not already done, share to a woman that you think she might love and enjoy and catch a gem from. And thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm in my zone of genius. I love doing these episodes. I love creating value for you guys. And this is going to be like the last time you see this setup for those who are watching for a little while. So I'm excited to bring you on a journey with me as we change setup, as we change the vibes up. But thank you so much for being here. That really means the world for me, that you take the time out of your day to be part of the Joy Talk. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.